The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbited quietly around Mars, its sensors constantly scanning the void for any unusual transmissions. Captain Mike Torres had been running the night shift for 3 years, and most nights brought nothing but cosmic background noise and the occasional merchant vessel checking in. Tonight was different. The signal came through at 0347 hours, weak and distorted, but unmistakably artificial. The computer system struggled to decode it, running the transmission through every known language database. When the translation finally appeared on Torres's screen, his coffee went cold in his hand. Please ... anyone ... our world dies. Children. Starve ... no hope left if someone hears this. The message repeated every few minutes, growing weaker each time. Torres immediately contacted Earth Command, and within hours, the signal had reached the highest levels of the Global Space Authority. What made this transmission extraordinary wasn't just that it came from an unknown alien species. It was the desperation that came through, even in translation. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenolinguist, worked around the clock to decode more of the message. The aliens called themselves the Keth, and their world was dying from some kind of environmental collapse. They had sent out dozens of distress calls to nearby star systems, but no one had answered. Earth was their last hope, though they seemed to doubt anyone would come. The Keth had made a critical error in their assumption about humans. They believed, like most species in the galaxy, that any civilization capable of space travel must have evolved on a peaceful, stable world. They couldn't imagine that anyone would willingly travel through the deadly vacuum of space unless absolutely necessary. What they didn't understand was that humans came from Earth, a planet so hostile that it had forged its inhabitants into something unprecedented in galactic terms. A species that thrived on challenge and refused to abandon those in need. Commander James Park stood before the assembled crew of the rescue ship Endurance. The vessel had been hastily retrofitted with emergency supplies, medical equipment, and terraforming tools. 150 volunteers had stepped forward for the mission, knowing they might not return. The Keth homeworld is 47 light-years away, Park announced to his crew. Our current technology will get us there in 8 months. We don't know what we'll find when we arrive, but we know they need help. Engineer Lisa Stone raised her hand. Sir, what if it's a trap? What if they're hostile? Park smiled grimly. Then they picked the wrong species to mess with. But I don't think it is. The linguistic analysis shows genuine distress. These people are dying, and they've given up hope that anyone will come. The crew prepared for departure with typical human efficiency. They loaded medical supplies, water purification systems, portable fusion reactors, and enough food to sustain both the human crew and potentially thousands of aliens. They also brought weapons, not because they expected trouble from the Keth, but because humans had learned long ago that space was full of dangers. As the Endurance engaged its faster-than-light drive, the crew settled in for the long journey. They spent their time studying what little they knew about Keth physiology and culture, preparing for every possible scenario they might encounter. None of them realized that their simple act of responding to a distress call would soon shake the foundations of galactic civilization. The major powers of the galaxy, the Nexus Federation, the Stellar Commonwealth, and the Void Collective had all received similar distress calls from dying worlds over the centuries. Their response had always been the same: ignore the signals and let natural selection take its course. The concept of risking one's own people to save complete strangers was so alien to most galactic species that they didn't even have words for it in their languages. They viewed it as an evolutionary impossibility. Surely any species foolish enough to risk themselves for others would have gone extinct long ago. But humans were different. They had evolved on a world where cooperation and mutual aid weren't just virtues, they were survival necessities. Hurricanes, Earthquakes, floods, and famines had taught humanity that sometimes the only way to survive was to help each other, even at great personal cost. As the Endurance hurtled through the void toward the dying Keth homeworld, its crew remained, unaware that they were about to introduce the galaxy to a concept that would change everything. The idea that strength wasn't measured by what you could take, but by what you were willing to give. The Keth had sent their message expecting silence. Instead, they were about to discover what it meant to catch the attention of a species that had spent millennia learning that no one gets left behind. 8 months after leaving Earth, the Endurance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Keth system. What the crew saw through their viewports made even the most hardened veterans fall silent. The Keth homeworld, which their databases now identified as Kelthura, was a brown and gray marble hanging in space. Where vibrant blues and greens should have marked oceans and continents, only dying landmasses and poisoned seas remained. The planet's 3 moons showed signs of hasty mining operations, desperate attempts to find resources that were no longer available on the surface. "Atmosphere analysis coming in," reported Navigator Tom Chun, his voice tight with concern. "Oxygen levels are down to 12%. Massive volcanic activity on the southern continent. The ocean pH is completely out of balance." Captain Park studied the readings with growing alarm. "How long do they have?" Dr. Vasquez looked up from her biological scanners. "Based on these readings, maybe 6 months before the atmosphere becomes completely unbreathable." The Endurance moved into orbit, and immediately their communications array lit up with activity. Dozens of weak signals were broadcasting from the planet's surface, not the coordinated distress call they had received, but scattered transmissions from communities that had given up hope of outside contact. "Captain," Communications Officer Dave Liu called out, "I'm picking up a transmission directed at us. Someone down there knows we're here." The message that came through was in the same language as the original distress call, but this time the translation was clearer. The voice belonged to someone called Prime Keeper Nala, apparently a leader among the Keth. "Unknown vessel, we detect your presence in our system. We ... We did not expect anyone to come. Our people have prepared for the end. If you are here to study our extinction, please know that we tried to preserve what knowledge we could." Park took the communications handset. "Prime Keeper Nala, this is Captain James Park of the Earth vessel Endurance. We received your distress call. We're here to help." The silence that followed lasted nearly 2 minutes. When Nala's voice returned, it carried a trembling quality that the universal translator couldn't fully convey. "Help? You came to help us? But we are strangers to you, unknown beings from a dying world. Why would you risk yourselves for us?" Park exchanged glances with his senior staff. They had expected this question, but hearing the genuine bewilderment in the alien's voice still caught them off guard. "Because you asked for help," Park replied simply. "And because that's what we do." What Park couldn't see was the effect his words had on the Keth leadership gathered around their communications center. Prime Keeper Nala collapsed into her chair, her forearms trembling. The concept of interstellar altruism was so foreign to their experience that many of them initially assumed it was some form of elaborate deception. The Keth had evolved on a world of abundance, where cooperation within family groups was common. But extending aid to outsiders was seen as wasteful and dangerous. When their world began dying due to industrial pollution and resource depletion, they had reached out to other species they knew existed in nearby systems. Every call had gone unanswered. The Nexus Federation had logged their distress signals, but classified them as natural selection events not requiring intervention. The Stellar Commonwealth had briefly considered a mining operation on Kelthura's moons, but decided the profit margins weren't worth the effort. The Void Collective had simply ignored the transmissions entirely. Now, impossible as it seemed, aliens from a distant star system had traveled for months just to answer their cry for help. Captain Park, Nala's voice came through again, stronger now but still filled with disbelief. We have 47 million survivors across 12 major settlements. Our industrial capacity is nearly gone. Our seas are dying. We have perhaps half a year before our world can no longer sustain life. What could you possibly do to help us? Park smiled, though he knew the alien couldn't see it. Prime Keeper, we're going to start by sending down our advanced teams to assess your immediate needs. We've brought water purification systems, medical, supplies, and portable power generators. Our terraforming specialists are already analyzing your atmospheric data. Terraforming? The word seemed to shock Nala. You can heal a dying world. We can try, Park replied. Humans have a saying, where there's life, there's hope. You're still alive, and that means there's still hope. As the Endurance began deploying its shuttles toward Kelthra's surface, none of the crew realized that their conversation was being monitored by automated listening posts throughout the sector. The major galactic powers were about to learn that a new player had entered their sphere of influence, one that operated by rules they didn't understand. The humans had arrived, and they were about to teach the galaxy what it meant to care. The first human shuttles touched down on Kelthra's surface. 12 hours after arrival, what they found defied every prediction their computers had made about alien civilization. The Keth were tall, graceful beings with 4 arms and large, dark eyes adapted to their world's dim sunlight. But it wasn't their appearance that shocked the humans, it was their cities. Despite facing extinction, the Keth settlements were marvels of artistic architecture, with flowing curves and delicate spires that seemed to dance in the toxic winds. Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's chief medical officer, was the first to meet Prime Keeper Nala in person. The Keth leader stood nearly 7 feet tall, her pale blue skin marked with intricate natural patterns that shifted color with her emotions. Currently, those patterns flickered between deep purple and silver, what the humans would later learn indicated profound confusion mixed with desperate hope. Your people, Nala said, gesturing toward the human team setting up equipment in the settlement's central plaza. They work as if they believe this world can truly be saved. Do they not understand that we are beyond help? Dr. Kim looked up from her atmospheric processor, sweat beading on her forehead despite the planet's cold temperature. Prime Keeper, my species has a stubborn streak. We don't give up on people, especially when they haven't given up on themselves. What Kim didn't mention was the heated debate that had taken place aboard the Endurance during the night. The scale of Kelthra's environmental collapse was staggering. The planet needed atmospheric rehabilitation, ocean chemistry restoration, soil decontamination, and ecosystem reconstruction. It was the kind of project that would normally take decades and the resources of multiple star systems. They had months, maybe less, but humans had faced impossible odds before. Engineer Lisa Stone had worked on the terraforming of Mars. Navigator Tom Chun had survived the atmospheric collapse of Europa Station. Communications Officer Dave Liu had helped evacuate 50,000 people from a dying colony in the Proxima system. Each of them brought experience in salvaging hope from disaster. Within 48 hours, the human operation was running at full capacity. Portable fusion reactors powered massive air scrubbers that began filtering toxins from the atmosphere. Ocean treatment barges, hastily assembled from the Endurance's modular components, started working to restore the pH balance of Kelthra's seas. Teams of humans worked alongside Keth volunteers to plant specially modified Earth bacteria that could process the worst soil contamination. The work was dangerous. The atmosphere was barely breathable, even with respirators. Toxic storms could appear without warning. The ground itself was unstable in many areas. But the humans pressed on with a determination that left the Keth speechless. "They sing while they work," reported Keeper Vex, one of Nala's advisors, after observing a human engineering team. "Their world is dying around them. Their own lives are at risk, yet they sing." Prime Keeper Nala watched through her settlement's observation deck as humans and Keth worked side by side, racing against time to save a world that wasn't even there. It challenged everything she thought she knew about survival and civilization. The Keth had evolved believing that intelligence meant careful resource management and avoiding unnecessary risks. When their world began to fail, they had done everything they could think of: rationing, recycling, seeking help from neighbors. When those solutions failed, they had accepted their fate with what they considered dignified resignation. But these humans operated on completely different principles. They seemed to view impossible odds not as reasons to surrender, but as challenges to overcome. More puzzling still, they were risking their lives for people they had never met before. "Prime Keeper," came a transmission from Dr. Kim's team. "We need to discuss relocation options for your coastal settlements. The ocean treatment process is going to cause significant tidal fluctuations over the next few weeks." Nala's patterns shifted to bright orange surprise, tinged with growing confidence. "You truly believe you can restore our seas?" "We're going to try our best," Kim replied. "But we'll need your people's help. You know this world better than we do." As word spread through the settlements that the aliens were not just offering comfort in their final days, but actually attempting to heal their dying world, something remarkable began to happen. Keth, who had spent months preparing for death, started volunteering for the recovery effort. Ancient knowledge about their world's original ecosystems was shared freely. Hidden stockpiles of preserved seeds and genetic materials were brought forward. For the first time in years, the Keth began to hope. Unknown to either species, their unprecedented cooperation was being observed by scouts from the galaxy's major powers. The Nexus Federation had dispatched a stealth probe to monitor what they assumed would be a brief humanitarian gesture followed by inevitable failure. Instead, they were witnessing something that would soon send shockwaves through galactic civilization. An entire dying world being brought back to life by aliens who expected nothing in return. The humans were rewriting the rules of galactic engagement, one impossible rescue at a time. 3 months into the restoration effort, Kelthera was showing signs of life that hadn't been seen in decades. The atmospheric processors had raised oxygen levels to 15% and climbing. The ocean treatment program had restored 3 major sea basins to nearly habitable conditions. Most remarkably, the first green shoots of new vegetation were appearing in areas that had been barren wasteland for years. The transformation hadn't gone unnoticed. Fleet Admiral Corvon of the Nexus Federation stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor readings from Kelthera with growing unease. The Nexus had built their civilization on the principle of calculated self-interest. Every action was weighed against potential gain, every resource expenditure justified by expected returns. What the humans were doing made no sense by any rational standard. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, "the humans have now committed 17 supply ships to the operation. They're drawing resources from multiple Earth colonies. The estimated cost of their intervention has exceeded the gross domestic product of some entire star systems." Corvin's scaled features tightened. "And their expected compensation from the Keth?" "None, sir. Our monitoring indicates they have requested nothing in return. No territorial concessions, no resource rights, no technological exchanges. They appear to be operating purely on altruistic principles." The word sounded alien even in the officer's mouth. The Nexus had encountered altruism before, but never on this scale, and certainly never from a spacefaring civilization. In their experience, any species capable of interstellar travel had long since evolved beyond such inefficient emotional responses. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy. The Stellar Commonwealth's High Council had convened an emergency session to discuss what they termed the human anomaly. The Void Collective's ruling artificial intelligences had run countless probability calculations, all concluding that the human behavior pattern was unsustainable and would lead to their civilization's collapse. None of them understood that they were observing the fundamental difference between humanity and every other known spacefaring species. Humans hadn't just survived their hostile homeworld. They had been shaped by it into something unique in galactic civilization. On Kelthera, oblivious to the galactic attention they were attracting, the humans continued their work with characteristic determination. Captain Park had established a permanent command center on the planet's surface, coordinating the massive logistics operation required to keep the restoration project running. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez called from her workstation, "I'm receiving communications from multiple sources. We've got incoming ships from at least 3 different stellar nations." Park frowned. "Are they offering assistance?" "Unknown, sir. But they're all requesting permission to observe our operations." Within days, Calthera's orbit resembled interstellar convention. Ships from the Nexus Federation, Stellar Commonwealth, Void Collective, and half a dozen smaller powers maintained careful distances from each other, while their crews studied the impossible scene below. Prime Keeper Nala found herself in the unprecedented position of hosting diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy. The Keth Settlement's council chambers, designed for internal governance, now held beings from a dozen different worlds. "Prime Keeper," said Ambassador Vex of the Stellar Commonwealth, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns, "we must ask, what concessions have you granted to the humans in exchange for their assistance?" Nala's color patterns shifted to confused silver. "Concessions? I do not understand the question." "Territorial rights, mining privileges, technological exchanges," pressed Fleet Commander Zex of the Void Collective, her mechanical voice carrying no emotion. "What payment have they demanded?" "They have demanded nothing," Nala replied, her patterns now showing bright orange confusion. "They came because we asked for help. They stay because the work is not finished." The assembled diplomats exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. The idea of expending vast resources without guaranteed compensation was so foreign to their thinking that many initially suspected the humans were operating some kind of elaborate long-term strategy that their own intelligence services couldn't detect. Ambassador Korath of the Nexus Federation leaned forward. "Prime Keeper, surely you understand that such altruism is impossible. No rational species commits resources on this scale without expecting returns. What are the humans' true objectives?" Nala stood, her forearms spread wide, her patterns blazing, with a golden hue the translators identified as passionate conviction. "Perhaps, Ambassador, your definition of rational is incomplete. These humans measure success not by what they gain, but by what they preserve. They are not here to take from use, they are here to give us back our future." The silence that followed was profound. In that moment, every galactic representative present realized they were witnessing something that would fundamentally change their understanding of civilization itself. The humans weren't just saving the Keth, they were challenging every assumption about how intelligent species were supposed to behave in the universe. And that terrified some of them more than any weapon ever could. 6 months after the Endurance first arrived at Kelthera, the planet's transformation was complete. The skies had returned to their original pale blue, the seas teemed with restored marine life, and the Keth cities once again echoed with the sounds of children playing in gardens that had bloomed for the first time in a generation. Captain Park stood in the central plaza of New Kelthera, a capital city that had been rebuilt using a combination of human engineering and Keth artistic sensibilities. Prime Keeper Nala approached him, her color patterns displaying the deep gold of profound gratitude mixed with silver threads of melancholy. "Captain Park," she said, her forearms extended in the Keth gesture deepest respect. "Today marks our world's rebirth, but also your departure. How can we ever repay what you have given us?" Park smiled, his weathered face creased with the satisfaction of a job well done. "Prime Keeper, seeing your people alive and your world healing is payment enough. But there is one thing you could do for us." Nala's patterns shifted expectantly. After months of receiving unconditional help, she was eager to finally offer something. "In return, remember what happened here," Park continued. "Remember that when someone calls for help, it's possible to answer. And someday, when you're able, maybe pass that lesson on to someone else who needs it." The simplicity of the request left Nala speechless. Around the galaxy, the diplomatic observers who had monitored the human operation came to the same stunning realization. The humans truly wanted nothing more than the knowledge that they had helped. The implications of this revelation rippled through galactic civilization like a shock wave. Fleet Admiral Corvin of the Nexus Federation found himself facing the most challenging decision of his career. His government had built its power on the principle that all interactions were transactional, that every species acted primarily in its own interest. The human intervention on Kelthera had shattered that worldview. "Admiral," his aide reported, "we're receiving distress calls from the Talani system. Their colony worlds are facing ecological collapse due to industrial accidents. Under normal circumstances, the Nexus would have filed the distress calls under natural selection events and ignored them. But knowing that humans existed in the galaxy humans who might respond to such calls changed everything. "Prepare a relief fleet," Corvin ordered, surprising himself with the words. "If we don't help them, the humans might. And if that happens?" The aide understood. If humans became known throughout the galaxy as the species that answered distress calls, their moral authority would eventually surpass that of any military or economic power. Similar calculations were being made across known space. The Stellar Commonwealth quietly began funding disaster relief operations on worlds they had previously ignored. The Void Collective's artificial intelligences developed new protocols for humanitarian assistance, calculating that some forms of altruism could serve long-term, strategic interests, but their efforts lacked something essential that the humans possessed naturally: the genuine desire to help without expectation of reward. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community, received a constant stream of visitors in her new office on a diplomatic station orbiting Proxima Centauri. Species from across the galaxy wanted to understand the mysterious concept humans called compassion. "Ambassador," asked Counselor Vith of the Hegemony worlds, "your species expends vast resources helping strangers. How do you maintain social cohesion when so much wealth leaves your territory?" Vasquez considered her answer carefully. "Counselor, we've learned that helping others doesn't make us weaker. It makes the entire galaxy stronger. A stable, peaceful galaxy benefits everyone, including humanity." What she didn't mention was the transformation happening within human space itself. The success on Kelthera had inspired a new wave of exploration and humanitarian missions. Young humans competed for positions on rescue ships. Earth's colonies began establishing rapid response fleets for interstellar disasters. Humanity was becoming the galaxy's unofficial emergency services, and they embraced the role enthusiastically. The Keth, meanwhile, had become the first converts to what galactic philosophers were calling the human paradigm. Using the knowledge they had gained working alongside human specialists, they began offering assistance to other worlds facing environmental crises. "We learned from the humans," Prime Keeper Nala explained to a gathering of galactic leaders. "That survival is not about hoarding resources or eliminating competition. True survival comes from building connections, creating networks of mutual support that make everyone stronger. As the first anniversary of Kelthera's salvation approached, long-range sensors detected something unprecedented, a massive fleet approaching from the direction of human space. Every galactic power braced for what they assumed was humanity's true invasion force, finally come to claim their rewards. Instead, the fleet consisted entirely of hospital ships, mobile research stations, and humanitarian supply vessels. The humans weren't coming to conquer. They were coming to help anyone who needed it. The galaxy would never be the same again.